people that understand English. Today we are going to do the same talk about wine that we did in March or April regarding the dates and nice stories regarding port wine.
Yeah, that's the idea. As you know, welcome all live from Instagram of IVDP_IP, and also live at our Facebook page in the several languages. We're starting today, I would say, a new era on our live moments on social networks and on social media, which is we will go through some features about port wine in English. And me and Bento decided to start with the context, what made port wine what it is today, why port wine is so special. And what is interesting about storytelling is that sometimes it's small stories or a streamline that will lead us to important dates and to important moments. It's like this in our life, and it will be like this in the story of the life of port wine. So Bento, I think we should start right away.
Yes.
About one very important date that immediately explain us how port is old, old and young at the same time.
We are talking about 1678, so before the demarcation of the region that we will speak later. So why this date is important, 1678? This is the date that we have as the first commercialization or export shipment of wine under the name port wine, 1678. But it's true that the story of wine in the Douro Valley is previous to that. So we know by archaeology that there are vines and wines at least as early as 2000 years ago, so before even the Romans. And this is true, but the story of port starts, I would say, also with the Anglo-Portuguese Treaty in 1654, and with new opportunities to sell and to trade to England. I would say also that there is another date that it's important, 1664. That is the date 1667. I'm sure. Sorry, that the first minister of Louis XIV, Colbert, has embarked some serious measures regarding the trade to the United Kingdom, and in this way we had the search of different markets of ports of wines, and these markets were Portuguese wines. So previously, the wines were from the. I'm sorry, some people are saying here that we have feedback, and I'm trying to solve the problem.
I think it was me. I think it was me, and it's already solved. Let's figure it out. Great. You can hear me, right, Bento?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
But so I was saying that the first market of wines traded from Portugal to the United Kingdom were not from the Douro Harbor, but from the Ponte Lima, or I'm sorry, from Viana do Castelo and the Lima River Harbor. Later, they have found the Douro Valley and the incredible Douro Valley. And so this is the reason. The first wines, and even the first wines exported as port wine, I would say that they were fortified at the end of the fermentation, so it would be something that it was not exactly what we say port like it is today. So after that, we have another date, 1756. And
What is
Paulo,
interesting about what is interesting about 1678 is that the wines were already there. They were being shipped to England, but they had several names before that, and it is on that exact date that in the Porto Harbor Customs the wine is exactly designed as designated as port wine. Before that, there were other wines, and as you were saying, which is very interesting, is that we would say that all wines were dry at that time. Today, all port wine is sweet. There is a reason for that. That we will probably go into that in another session, not today, most probably. But wines were sweet because they were the wine spirit was only added at the end for the wines to resist the trip to England, mainly to England, but also to Brazil, to Russia, to the main markets of the 17th century. The Douro Valley wines, the smelly wines of the Douro, smell in the good sense, but port wines shipped from port wine, it's only appears for the first time in Porto customs in 1678. So it was probably said in the streets and already in the trade. It was being named as port wine, but that's why the date is so important. After that, we have another important date, which is 1756. And this is for those who are wine lovers that are hearing us, it's a very important date because from what Bento said, since Colbert and the embargo of French wines into England, that the port wine business rose a lot, as other businesses for English merchants such as sherry, for instance. But trade began.
Well, it seems that people are not hearing you in Instagram. So we are talking about 1756, and we are going to. It's only a problem with Paulo, or do you hear me? Can you hear me in Instagram?
And me? Am I ready? I'm okay now in Instagram?
There is a delay, just a minute. Bento okay, and Paulo. All is okay? Only Bento? Oh, great. We have
okay, great. Thank you.
News, so we can continue, Paulo.
New technologies. Okay, so 1756. Trade was being very good, and the peak of this trade business was the Meeting Treaty in 1703. So we ran from 1678 to 1703, and business became very important for the region, very important for the city, until the moment that the success is so high that we start to having a lot of copies. A lot of wine, rubbish wine, getting into the barrels in order to be shipped as port wine. We have to say that the region was, or Douro and the city of Porto, was receiving wines from all over Portugal, and not only the Douro region. So the wines were being adulterated. The color was being added. And rubbish wines, we would say, would pass as port wines. And this created, after the peak of 1703, in the mid of the 18th century, of the 1700s, we have a crisis. We have a crisis of reputation of port wine. And is in this period, that the books say, and the letters at the time say, the good men of Douro, so the farmers and the owners, the estate owners that were established in the several towns and villages of the Douro, they pledged to the king and to the prime minister in order to close the region. Basically, they state that if the Douro wine is good and port wine is good, port wine should be only shipped from the Douro region. Something strange for us right now today. But actually, it's what happened. The good man of the Douro pledged to the king to close the region. And actually, that was what he did through his prime minister, which is, for those who like the port wine history, Marquês de Pombal, Marquis of Pombal, that created a law, created a company that was very common at the time. The company, it was the period of Illuminism. There were the India Trade Company in England, in Holland, and actually it was a company was created, the company of the vineyards of Alto Douro, established in 1756, that actually would become with three pillars. They delimited, they closed the region. They created a series of laws and rules in order to enhance the quality of the wine. And they also created an entity, an institute, what's not Port Wine Institute, but they created an entity which was the company itself, in order to control the region and the laws of production. So it is the first time in history where we have the drawing, the sketch of a denomination of origin, of an appellation. That's why port wine is so important. And sometimes in books, you hear that port wine was the first appellation in the world, the first denomination of origin in the world. Because if you think now about Champagne or Bordeaux, or even sometimes related to the Napa Valley, for instance, you have a little bit of this. But mainly in Europe, all the regions and appellations in Europe are not only related with wine, but also with cheese, with meat, with water, with fruits. You have an appellation. An appellation has always these three pillars: a region, a set of rules, and an entity that would control those rules. So 1756, based on a crisis, is an important mark for all that we consider the trade patterns, and the intellectual property movement started also there. And then I would say that port wine graciously continued until one of these main challenge of the 19th century. Bento.
Okay, so before that, I would say that during the early 19th century, there we have seen some changes in the winemaking regarding fortification and
and sweetness,
sugar levels. Sorry?
Sweetness.
Yes, sweetness and sugar levels, yes. But the biggest problems arrived on the second half of the 19th century with the vine diseases. And the worst of them is the phylloxera that appears in the Douro Valley in 1868, as you can see now. And so this might, I don't know exactly how to spell this word, but so a small insect that lives near the roots of the American vines, and that came to Europe and due to the American vines, because people were trying to find something to combat another disease called oidium. And so the first time that this insect was found was in the America, of course, in 1853 in Colorado, in wild vines in the Colorado. But in Europe, it has been found first in 1863 in Gare, so in the south of Gare province, in the south of France. And Portugal is the second country in Europe where this ravage appeared. And it has appeared in the Douro Valley, first in the Sabrosa, and it was in the Quinta da Azinheira. To have an idea, 10 years later, we had lost 25% of our production of port wine. And after that, we had some changes in the landscape, but also in the production. During some time, we had the production of tobacco, the production of silk. Not well, yes, silk, but it's
there was a commission created to study the alternatives of port production, which raw material could be produced instead of wine. So there was not a lot of hope at that time that wine could prevail in the Douro region.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you agree?
Yes, it is. It was very bad, and I would say very hard at times for Douro producers or wine producers in the Douro Valley. And so this, I think that that the solution came exactly with the problem or the origin of the problem, that are the roots of the American vines. And then we have grafted our traditional vines, Portuguese vines,
rootstock.
The roots, yes, in rootstock.
Yeah.
So, please.
But as you were saying, that it was a period of famine. It was a period of starvation. Lots of vineyards were abandoned, and people fled in order for a better life to the cities, and mainly also to Brazil. A lot of immigration. But it's interesting that we can still see some abandoned vineyards in the Douro,
Yes.
so which are a live legacy of what happened at that time. 150 years passed, and the Douro can still show the scars of what happened with phylloxera. Don't you agree?
Yes, it's called Murtorius, and you can see that this is in some wild and abandoned vines. Terraces, yes, terraces. Yeah. that you can see, yes.
Do you have any idea how much types of cepage? I'm missing the word. Wine varieties changed, so probably things change a lot at that time. Although if we taste some wines prior to that, the wines are still magnificent. They seem that they were done.
Yes, there were some grape varieties that have been used more, like the Morisco, that nowadays we have a different name for this grape variety because it was quite resistant to phylloxera. Mm-hmm. So people have made some crosses with Touriga Nacional, that was a great variety, and with Morisco, that was a grape variety that was resistant, and at this time appeared Touriga Franca, for example, or Touriga Fêmea. Mm-hmm. And yes, but as Paulo said, I would say that even if it's a very exciting and emotional experience to taste wines prior to phylloxera, it's also interesting to understand that the sense of place, it's more important. And I think that we can have here an idea that the wines in nowadays and the wines that prior to phylloxera have the same style, the same sense of place that we have. And this is important to have this concept of denomination of origin a long time.
Yeah, no, you are completely right. Yes. And we move on. So landscape changed. most of the post-phylloxera plantations are in places where wine vineyards didn't exist. The development also of the Douro Superior when it opened also at that time. It was very interesting, and then we come into the 20th century to a date that we don't speak a lot to it. When we are wine educators, me and you, and sometimes in the institute, probably because it's too close. And so we still don't have an historic perspective on that because we all live it quite closely. Well, you a little bit more than this, than me because I was younger than you. But I still remember, which is 1986.
Yeah.
I also pledged you to put some questions. If you have questions for us, we will be more than happy to answer to our knowledge. If we speak about all the history of port wine, we will be here until 9 or 10 p.m. That's not the idea, but nevertheless, if you have something, just just ask. Put some questions on Instagram or on our Facebook. 1986. What's this special date about 1986? It's the day where Portugal gets into the European Union, European Economic Community, as it was called at the time. And this is very important because it reshaped the trade as we know it today. And one of the main assets, it was that the obligation of the wines being shipped through Porto or Gaia, we have to say it, is over. So in 1986, ship and export, because it could be shipped from the Douro to the national market before that. But in 1986, it's when the small companies or the companies and estates that usually sold their wines to the big houses in Gaia and Porto start to be able to ship their own brands abroad. And that's why usually you have from this date on much more, for instance, vintage or LBV dated ports that you are able to find in the market before 1986, before 1980 is very difficult to find it. There is always the reference of the Infantado 1978, which is a landmark in the producer, the producer and not shipper vintage port. And this is a landmark because they were a little bit pioneers on the perspective. Other houses were already starting. Sorry, but this was very important. The small estates could be able to brand their own wines and exports, and so in the end of the 80s, early 90s, we have several companies that start to believe in themselves and put their own wines, port in the beginning, but also Douro wines into the market. And if we look back, that's where the boom starts for Douro production. And so this is one of the main assets that 1986 gave us in related to the reshaping of the trade in the Douro region. I don't know if you want to add something, Bento.
Oh, just the degree. The degree is the 86 from 86 March 6. So just a geek information. And we have a question here. Do you know how many vintage wineries exist in the Douro Valley? I would say that the question probably is how many producers we have at this time. And it's not exactly the precise number, but I would say that 100 producers of port and something like a little bit, probably in nowadays, a little bit higher than 500 producers of Douro wines. I don't think we have
500, you
reached.
said?
Yes,
Okay.
I think we will be
But
near
on
the
those
500.
500s, you include the port producers also, most
No,
of
no,
them, right?
Douro,
I don't only. Okay.
Douro only. I think it's like that. I don't know, Paulo, if we you have something more to comment, or
I think,
someone if wants.
yeah, well, as I said, 1986 is very close to us, and we are still seeing this reshaping of the trade. We see much more winemakers that are born in the Douro, people, young winemakers that are passionate and that live there. So it's very interesting to see that this passion is still reshaping. First, we reshape the trade. Not we, but all the people, and then we are reshaping the wines also and creating an identity, mainly in Douro wines, more than port. That, of course, with its 300 years that we ran here in 25 minutes. It's already much more intense in terms of personality because of its 300 years, but it's also very important, and probably we will go through that in another
In the
session.
future.
The how personality of Douro wines is being created. Uh, with all its I would say uh, vicissitudes. I don't know if the word exists in English, but
I think
with all the with all that it can import and then shape it through its art into wine production. What we You were head of the tasting chamber, and you know how Douro wines were 20 years ago and how they are now, and also how we can perceive a little bit what they will be in the future. Parker without Parker, much more
yes.
less rustic and more polite right now, and probably going into the scene that everyone is going. We have another question, but if you want to express some of it a little bit regarding how those wines are doing in the past 25 years, it's
Right.
interesting
We are
also.
regarding. So this is more focused in in Douro than in Port. I would say that, well, we have started to see a good average quality in the 90s. Then in the early 2000s, we have started to have uh, amazing wines that have been recognized by all over the world in small amounts. And we are talking about wines that were very powerful, with a lot of color, and also with a lot of oak and with a lot of tannins. After that, as all over the world since 2005, 2010, there is a trend to less alcoholic, less extractive wines, and these less alcoholic, less extracted wines. So the analogy has also tried to adapt to this style, but also to only to but because we have different areas in the Douro where we can do, and also great varieties. We have here two different questions
Questions, yes.
regarding having a
Regarding Lean
tasting.
Fry, I can answer. The question
Okay.
is, do you still export large amount of Douro wines to the UK? Because we rarely see any in supermarkets there. That's a good question. Thank you. Mainly because I don't think the future of Douro wines will be through supermarkets, not multiples for sure. You can see a lot of Douro wines and the Portuguese wines. A lot, I would say, a much better selection of Douro wines and generically Portuguese wines in small retailers, high street. than in the big supermarkets. They are there. Usually, big supermarkets ask for enormous quantities of wine in order to put them on shelves. So we don't see a lot of we can see Douro wines in the multiples and in supermarkets in the UK, but we don't see as frequent as Argentinian or Spanish or Italian or French. And I don't think the future will go into that road. But yes, more high hands, better quality, money value in small retailers and smaller shops in the high street. Yes. And
Regarding the question that we had in Instagram, I don't know if I have read it all. I think that there were two different questions: how vintage port it is approved, and also if it's possible to taste at the tasting chamber of the Port Wine Institute. So it is not possible to taste at the tasting chamber of the Port Wine Institute. It's the same thing that asking to drive a Formula One. It's yes, I think it's very exciting, but it's for professionals. But you can taste, and you have we have a shop where you can taste some wines.
I think Portugalen's blog was asking if we could make an Instagram session about the tasting chamber. That's how I understood the question.
Okay.
And how vintage is approved. So I think we could answer to that, saying that we can schedule a session about how the tasting chamber works, and on that day we will explain how vintage port is approved, which is very, very interesting. And what is a declaration? What is a proclamation? What is a approval of a vintage? Because sometimes people get confused, and it's not that difficult to. Once you know, it's not that difficult to figure that out. So, Bento, I think we are great.
Yes,
because we ran 300 years in 32 minutes.
Yes.
So
okay, I hope that you can join us in another
session.
Yes,
we will have some more time. Unfortunately, in Portugal, we will have to stay at home quite some time now. We will try, if not Bento or me, some other colleagues. We will come to make these sessions in English. There is one more question.
Wow. So
from Björn.
Hi, Björn. How are you?
Thank you.
You talk about all the bundle. I know that some younger producers like it are finding gold vineyard fields and starting to produce still wines with grapes from them. Most often in altitude. How old are those vineyards?
Yeah.
Are they going?
How old can we find? Yeah. How old can be old vineyards in Douro Superior? Well, it's a good question, but don't forget, Björn, that Douro Superior has also 150 years. So, from my point of view, I think old vineyards would have the same sense in Douro Superior, such as in Baixo Corvo. The question is how these young winemakers know the land and know the terroir in order to find what they feel are good raw material to produce still wines. Bento, I don't know if you want to finish.
Yes, so it's possible to have, or there were vines in the Douro Superior at this time. This is the reason also that the region, and some of you can know, the port region or the area to produce port wine was a little bit smaller and didn't include the Douro Superior before. But after that, we can have vines from that time. Okay, I don't know, Paulo.
No, I think it's okay. Yes, they go back to phylloxera, although, as I said in the beginning, lots of were also planted after phylloxera, but right after phylloxera, still in the late 1800s. Another question? Let's
So
go.
I think that people want us to
No,
say
for
here
me,
a little bit.
we
Should Portugal sell more by variety or area as other countries?
should Portugal.
It's a little bit tricky. I think that we should we work at Douro Port Wine Institute, so we should defend and keep the Douro region regarding port and Douro wines. But of course, we have a lot of great and a big diversity of great varieties that we should promote, that we should that the world know them, and so we are going for sure to do talk about great varieties.
Yeah,
Of these great
I
varieties.
think, for a country that has so much focus on denomination of origin, it will be difficult to put another asset, which is an asset, but to focus as another asset as the main one, which would be the Touriga Nacional or the grape variety. Or this is an excellent Alentejo Syrah, or this, it's completely different. We believe that the denominations of origin should prevail. And when I say we, I think I speak for Portugal itself, that's been promoting a lot of its denominations of origin. And in a second level of promotion, of course, grape varieties that are native to those regions. For instance, Baga in Bairrada or Alvarinho in Vinho Verde, not to give Douro examples. But that is a good question.
Well, we have here extra hours. One is regarding how we know how old is a vine, which kind of research is done.
It's made.
Well, we have professionals that can check the age of the vines. I'm not this kind of professional. But yes, but this of course,
It's
if it's a little bit large, if it's large, it's probably older than thinner one. Regarding when 10, 20, 30, 40 years old white were officially released in Portugal, this is the authorization to produce these old white ports was in October 2006. So probably the first to be released was late 2006 or probably early 2007.
Yeah, that's when we regulated the white aged ports.
Mm-hmm.
Before that was only old or very old.
Yes.
Okay, Bento. This is a good sign. We had lots of questions. Yes. We're very happy about it. And we will be back. Please pay attention to our social media. We will be announcing another session very soon. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for watching and stay safe.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Bye. See you soon.
Bye.